Donald Trump didn't just lose a dispute over Greenland. He lost control of the illusion that he still dominates the world stage. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The anxiety. The irritation. The petty retaliation masquerading as strength. Because when real power slips away, what's left is performance. And Trump is performing again. This story isn't about an invitation being withdrawn. It's about why it had to be withdrawn. And what Trump accidentally revealed by doing it. Before Davos, Trump's team quietly floated an idea. A so-called American-led Board of Peace. A group framed as a global authority on post-war reconstruction and stability. The message was subtle but clear: sit at Trump's table, or be left out of the future. Mark Carney didn't rush to accept. He didn't flatter. He didn't posture. He agreed only in principle, asking the questions that actually matter: governance, legitimacy, financing, real authority. Questions Trump hates, because they expose substance gaps. Then came Davos. And that's where everything shifted. On that stage, Carney did something Trump cannot tolerate. He named the system. He said out loud what many leaders whisper privately, that middle powers can no longer survive by accommodating economic coercion, especially when it comes from the United States. That strength doesn't come from submission. It comes from coordination. From acting together. From refusing to be pressured into silence. That speech wasn't loud. It wasn't insulting. It was worse than that. For Trump, it was calm, precise, and credible. Within days, the invitation disappeared. No explanation. No justification. Just rescinded. Trump wanted it to look like leverage. Like he was pulling access away from Carney. But here's the problem. You can't withdraw power you don't actually have. Because when people looked at Trump's so-called Board of Peace, the reality was embarrassing. 19 countries. None of them major global decision-makers. No France. No United Kingdom. No Germany. No Canada. No China. No real centers of gravity. This wasn't a table where the future is decided. It was a stage prop. A room designed so Trump could sit at the head and pretend the world still revolves around him. Carney didn't lose access to power. Trump exposed that he's no longer in control of it. And that's why Carney's response was silence. No press conference. No rebuttal. No defensive explanation. Because when retaliation proves your point, you don't interrupt it. Trump wanted outrage. He wanted noise. He wanted Carney to look rattled. Instead, he got indifference. And nothing unsettles Trump more than realizing he no longer sets the emotional tempo. Then came the social media spiral. Trump claimed Canada opposed his so-called Golden Dome over Greenland. He framed it as a system meant to protect Canada. He accused Ottawa of siding with China instead of the United States. He warned, dramatically, that China would eat Canada up. This wasn't strategy. This was frustration leaking in public. Because Trump understands something very clearly, even if he can't admit it. Canada no longer reacts to pressure the way it used to. For years, Ottawa followed Washington's lead on China. Tariffs. Restrictions. Alignment. Be on side, they said. Protect our markets together. And what did Canada get in return? Tariffs. Threats. And talk of annexation. That lesson landed. Carney understood that compliance didn't buy security. It invited more demands. So Canada adjusted, not recklessly, not naively, but deliberately. Diversifying trade. Building alternatives. Reducing dependency. And now, the leverage that Washington once relied on doesn't work the way it used to. That's why the panic is visible. Because dominance only functions when the other side has no options. And Canada has options now. Trump didn't withdraw an invitation because Carney overstepped. He withdrew it because Carney stepped outside his control. And that's the part Trump can't tolerate. This is where the story stops being about Canada and starts becoming about the world Trump no longer controls. Because Davos didn't just irritate Trump. It exposed him. While Trump was busy withdrawing invitations and posting online rants, something else was happening quietly, and that's the part that matters. Leaders across Europe were repositioning. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Strategically. They weren't looking for confrontation. They were looking for insulation. And one figure stood out. Mark Carney. Not because he was the most aggressive voice in the room, but because he articulated what others were thinking without sounding desperate or defiant. He didn't call for rebellion. He outlined a framework. Middle powers acting together. Naming coercion when it happens. Building strength at home while reinforcing alliances abroad. Ending the habit of nostalgia-driven dependence. That's why analysts are now asking an uncomfortable question for Washington. Has Mark Carney become the de facto focal point of resistance to Trump's worldview? Not a rebel. Not an antagonist. But a stabilizer who refuses submission. Trump thrives on imbalance. On deals where the other side needs him more than he needs them. On leverage created by dependency. That's how he exerts control without having to lead. Carney disrupted that equation. By defending Greenland. By aligning with Europe. By engaging China without asking Washington for permission. Each move on its own is manageable. Together they signal something Trump understands instinctively. The era of automatic compliance is ending. That's why Trump's reaction wasn't measured. It was emotional. Because when dominance fades, control gives way to resentment. And here's the irony Trump didn't anticipate. By pulling the invitation, he elevated Carney. He confirmed that Carney doesn't need American approval to matter. That credibility now comes from coherence, not proximity to Washington. That leadership is shifting away from spectacle and toward coordination. Trump tried to sideline him. Instead, he crowned him. Because silence in this context was power. Carney didn't argue because he didn't have to. He didn't defend himself because nothing was taken from him. Trump's withdrawal didn't weaken Carney, it validated his argument in real time. This is what a power transition looks like when it isn't announced with flags and speeches. It looks like frustration. It looks like social media outbursts. It looks like symbolic boards filled with countries that don't actually decide anything. And it looks like leaders who once dominated the conversation now reacting instead of directing it. Trump didn't lose Greenland because of policy failure. He lost it because intimidation stopped working. Because economic threats no longer land the way they used to. Because middle powers are discovering that acting together reduces vulnerability. Momentum is shifting. Not suddenly. Not cleanly. But decisively. And that's what makes this moment dangerous for Trump. Because he is no longer shaping the environment. He's responding to it. Lashing out. Testing pressure points that no longer yield the same results. The world is adjusting without asking for permission. That's the real takeaway here. Not that Trump rescinded an invitation. But that it didn't matter. And once a move stops mattering, power has already moved on. If you want clear, unfiltered analysis of how Canada and other middle powers are navigating a world driven by pressure, coercion, and shifting alliances, this is the place for it. Subscribe for context that doesn't chase outrage but explains what's actually changing. Because the balance of power isn't collapsing. It's rearranging. And the leaders who understand that will shape what comes next.
Canada debates.